So, good morning. My name is Shirey Archie. That's spelled Shirey. I was born in Washington, Arkansas, very close to where Bill Clinton was born, in fact. He got the White House, I got the outhouse. I've lived in Albany since 1993, and I moved here from Western New York to work. Activism was never anything that I was even remotely interested in, and then I made the mistake, and it was a mistake, of having a son at a late date in life, 2005. Um, and everything became personal. It stopped being abstract, the need to um, be responsible. I had figured out how I could walk through the world as a black man without getting in too much trouble. Now I had to figure out how to help this brown boy navigate a world that's not really okay with brown boys. And that became a personal responsibility. And so, first couple years is just a matter of getting used to having a kid and doing the things that you need to do. And by the time he started school, I realized I had to start doing something, and not so much to change the world, but to show him as he grew up that I had tried, and and that's what I basically set about doing. First thing I wanted to do is his mother is Muslim, so I wanted to find a counterbalance to that by finding a church or institution that could teach some other things, because I tend not to believe in very much, so to give him some kind of balance. So I started searching around to the Unitarians and the Quakers and different groups like that, and that's when you begin to meet people that are doing the things that are related to activism. And then it became a question of what could I do? And first it was just joining the various vigils that happen around Albany. I became aware of Jen San at the Grafton Peace Pagoda and decided to walk with her a few times. Quickly recognized that walking is not my forte. For her, it's a spiritual experience to walk and drum. For me, it's a burden and a lot of work. So again, started searching for what I could do. I was at a rally downtown, one of the peace rallies or something, and I was standing on the side of the street opposite the rally, and I realized that you can't be in it until you cross the street and be in it. And that was kind of the first kind of commitment to doing something. So first it was walking and vigiling with Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace, walking with Jinsan. We walked in New York once, went to Washington for a rally. In 2014, I was talking to a friend, and she said, she reminded me that 2015 would be the 50th, 100th, or 150th anniversary of something related to civil rights. And I said, oh, being unaware. Is that so? And Juneteenth would have been one of the anniversaries. I decided, I don't know how or why, to make this sign, which is in my car. And the sign says, "Stand against racism." And it took a long time to make the sign. And then it took a long time to decide to stand with the sign. And I realized that that's kind of part of that process of stepping out in front of people actively. It's not an easy thing to do. But eventually I did it, found a corner, stood with the sign. Nobody shot me. Hallelujah. And I patted myself on the back for it until I realized, like, that was pretty safe. Why don't you do something a little more dangerous? So I drove from Albany to Route 2 out near Grafton, going towards Grafton. There's a Stewart's out there, and it's kind of country. And I was going to stand with my sign in the country. On the day I drove out there, the closer I got to the spot, the more afraid I was. And when I got there, I couldn't stand. So I turned around and I drove back home. And on the way back, for theatrical purposes, I can tell you that I heard the voice of Rosa Parks or Emmett Till or Martin Luther King or Malcolm X in my head saying, "What are you going to do?" But the truth is, I didn't hear their voices. I heard my own voice saying, "What are you going to do? How are you going to be anything in the world if you don't go ahead and do this? How are you going to represent for him if you don't?" So the next day I drove back and stood for an hour and nobody shot me. And it was okay. And since then, there have been a few times that I've stood in places that take a little bit more courage, but for the most part, it's just a matter of like, get up, get out the sign, stand somewhere for some period of time, and just keep doing it. That's a hard one for me because I've been not really involved in activism, I'm, less than really 15, 17 years. Observationally, what I think is that I look back at the 60s, there was huge, events that happened, people in the streets, all over all over the world, in fact. But and a lot of it was motivated by young people, and then it just fizzled and died, and then sporadically we'll have the same kind of thing happen, an event, a reaction, people in the streets. But from my standpoint, not much really changes. We get incremental. The different groups get something and they go away and they're no longer part of the cooperative, I guess is a word I could use. So what's changed? Technology has changed, the way that activists can relate to each other, but it's still pretty much the same. It's like we apply pressure in some way to get a result that we hope will cause things to be different. But as much as things have changed, so much is still the same. And for me, there's a certain sadness in that, even though I have not been involved. It's a shame that people in the South originally, the folks who rode in the South on those buses signed wills because they were so committed to what they were doing and so aware of what could happen to them. And they were willing to put their lives on the line. And we're still fighting for the stuff that they were fighting for. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I wonder why. So what's changed? I don't know. I think, I don't know. It's a hard one to really answer. No, I don't think we were part of the Great Migration. I recently talked to my mother about why we came out of the South to the North. And her response to me was that people left the South on a regular basis. They went north to Ohio, New York, west to California. But the real purpose was to find work. And so seasonally, people would leave the South to find work in these other places. And some would stay in the other places and others would come back. And so there was this ebb and flow. Eventually, if a husband left and found work in Ohio, then the wife would come and bring the kids later on, those kinds of things. So we migrated out of the South, but I don't consider that we were part of the Great Migration. But we did. We left Arkansas. My brother and I have a younger siblings. My brother and I were born there. We ended up in Ohio, where I have another brother and sister were born. From Ohio, we ended up in Western New York. By the time I was 8, 9 years old, and I lived in Western New York for the majority of my life until I moved here. So we were part of the flow out of the South to the North because that's where you could find work. What do I have to say to young people? Nothing. Young people, it's a whole nother era. There's no way that I, as a 74-year-old, can say anything to young folks except be committed to what you're doing. But technology has made a huge difference in how things are done. In fact, rather than tell them, I ask them quite often, like, how can I move into the now? I started with the sign, and someone suggested that I start a website. And that wasn't, the forefront of my mind, but eventually I asked someone who asked a young person who had that knowledge, and she was recently able to create a website which did exactly what it's supposed to, gave me exposure to places that I had not been exposed to. And now I have to figure out how to accommodate that exposure. What would I say to young people about activism? I would say, for me, race and racism is not a cause. It's personal. I have skin in the game. Day to day, I live the insanity of it. Although you may not be able to have the same commitment to what you do as I do in having skin in the game, I think you have to try to have the same commitment. To do something just because it's a cause, the cause of the week, the cause of the month, it doesn't work. You'll burn out quickly. There's not sufficient energy to be maintained, and nothing will be accomplished. So think about what you want to do, and then make a decision to be committed to it. And whatever it is, large or small, you don't have to change the world, but you could change a small thing in your world that can make a huge difference. So, young folks are going to do what they're going to do. The biggest piece is commitment, is making a decision and being committed to the decision, whatever you do. Don't bite off more than you can chew. But whatever you bite off, keep chewing. because we need you. We need people who are committed to whatever the cause is. It's really hard to have people stand and talk to me for 15 or 20 minutes telling me what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and then a week later I don't see them. That's disheartening. So I would rather you not. Like, if you're just chatting to chat, please chat with someone else. But if you have a few minutes to make some decisions about how you want to make a change for the better for your world and mine, then let's talk about that.
Tell me your website, please.
https://www.standagainstracism.info. If you go to the website, you'll see some of the books that And they're the books that the three of the books are the ones that I originally used to educate myself, because not only was I not an activist or not active with things, I was also undereducated. And you don't know it until you start reading things. Um, our history is not taught. Black history is not taught. And so I had to educate myself when I started doing this work, because, and that's what really helped to reinforce the commitment to, like, I could see my father's name in the history. I could see my son's name in reading the history. And that's what made it more real, made me more committed, made me more angry about the reality of how little has changed over 400 years that we've been forced to participate in this economic nightmare. So Vietnam, um, February of '69 to December of '71 was my uh, enlistment draft period. 2 years, 9 months, and 20 days. 5 days as a draftee because a military person said, if you take this offer and take an extra year, you might avoid Vietnam. So I, being the silly young man that I was, took the offer. I took an extra year. Draftee, you did 2 years. Regular Army was 3 years. So I took an extra year in the hopes of avoiding Vietnam. I got military intelligence school, and still ended up in Vietnam. So anyone who's listening, those stories that they tell you are not always true. Um, I, as I said, I was drafted, and I was never, as I said previously, an activist. And I wasn't really conscious of what was going on around the Vietnam War and all of that. But I was aware that I may not necessarily have wanted to go. We lived in Niagara Falls at the time. It cost 10 cents to walk across the bridge to Niagara Falls, Ontario. 10 cents. So I went and talked to my mother and asked her, what should I do in terms of going or not going? And she said, child, it doesn't really matter. I'll love you one way or the other. And so I made the decision to go. Part of the decision to go was this: I'm going to go, do my duty, and when I come back, I expect to be treated like a full citizen. Now, I'm not sure where that came from, because I had never read it anywhere that I was conscious of. But it's the same thought that black men have had since the Revolutionary War. I'll do my duty for this country, and then I expect to be treated like a citizen. And that was my hope. And 50 years later, 50 plus years later, I'm still waiting for my letter of citizenship. I'm still waiting for that letter that says you're free to come and go as you choose. You're free to walk wherever you want to. You're a free man in this country. I'm still waiting for that. 2 years, 9 months, 20 days, military intelligence school, went through San Francisco, went through Oakland, California to go to Vietnam. My mother went with me to California to see me off. And the reason for that is her father had left the South right after I was born. And she hadn't seen him in about 20 years. So it was part of the trip was for her to see him and see me off. I speak honestly, in terms of Vietnam, I was crazy before I went. I was crazy while I was there, and I was crazy when I came back. And none of it had anything to do with Vietnam. It was just who I was as a young man on my way into craziness. Um, what was being in Vietnam like? I was a rear area soldier. Military intelligence. What we did in my unit was gather information through various means to create targets for the military forces that were in the field. At the time, there was no real connection for me between what I was doing and the end result, which may have been someone being killed. It was not something I thought about then, and it was only, in the last maybe 15 years that I really thought about it. The thing about Vietnam is like the thing about war, especially if you're, for us overseas, is like you can't leave. It's like you just can't say I've had enough of this and I'm going to go home. So you have to kind of you got to hang in there. And rear area, but in a war zone, there really is no rear area. We'd have mortar attacks on occasion. When you're first there, it's something that scares you. After about 9 or 10 months, you kind of sleep through them. When you start sleeping through them, you realize it's time to go home because you can still get hurt. Vietnam, I was not a good soldier, but I was not a bad soldier. So for me, Vietnam was simply, was in many ways just a part of my journey in life. It's something that happened. I turned 21 there. I was, legal drinking age but in Vietnam, nobody cared how old you were. If you were 17 or 16 or 15, you could drink. So that was my basic Vietnam experience. When I came back from Vietnam, I still had time to spend in the military. I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. So I'm a northerner stationed at Fort Bragg. And one of the first things they told us is, like, please remember that outside of these gates, it's private property. So if you see a Confederate flag on someone's private property, that's their business, not yours. And that, being a northerner, that was kind of like difficult for a little bit. But that was the piece. It was like I've gone and done this thing in Vietnam. Not that I'm putting my life on the line, but I'm available to be fodder if that's what would happen. And then I come back and I can't walk freely. I have to look at this thing that symbolizes real hate and not be able to do anything about it. I'm safe within the confines of the gates of the fort, but outside of the gates of the fort, at night, you still had to be very careful. So fast forward some more, I think about why did I end up drafted in the first place? I had tuberculosis as a child. So as a direct result of having tuberculosis, I was not allowed to participate in gym class or swim class or those kind of physical activities because of my health. And yet I was 1A for the draft. How do you end up 1A for the draft and you can barely, it was craziness. And then, but because I'm a young macho man, I want to, I'm with a bunch of other young macho men. I want to do the very best I can, and I really do kind of excel at being this soldier. So, but why did I get drafted in the first place when my health was so bad? And the basic reason, I wasn't in college, couldn't afford to go to college at that time, so I'm fodder for the machine. A lot of guys, got out of it because of little things and college and money, and I was not able to do that. I'm not angry about that, really, but there's a certain injustice about that. When you're in the middle of it, I don't think that I realized how many poor, black, barely out of high school men were affected by it at the time. It's something that you realize later on. A lot of my friends went. Most came back okay. Some came back a little silly. War, as I've gotten older and thought more about it, my problem with so much of it is that statement, like, thank you for your service. People who don't understand what happens in war, the real atrocity of war, the harm that's done to the enemy, as well as they say things like, thank you for your service. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I ask people don't thank me for my service. Give me citizenship. I would really appreciate citizenship, but don't thank me for my service. War is no. I was standing on a street corner one time, quick story, in Delmar with Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace, and a guy and his partner, wife, older couple, walking towards me, and my sign said, "War is not the answer." And so the guy whispers to me and says, "Well, what about the Civil War?" So I had to take a few minutes to think about it because I knew what he was trying to say. And I responded, no war is a good war. What he didn't understand or didn't care about was that the Civil War didn't do anything for me. The Civil War didn't free me. So no war is good war, even the Civil War. How did I come to know about Veterans for Peace? Probably through John Amadon and the Quaker meeting. And I had been around enough vigils to be on an email list or something. So I think I got just one of the basic generic invitations. There, Veterans for Peace is going to march in the parade. If you want to join, please do. Meet us at a certain location and time, which I decided to do. I remember that, but that goes back to walking. I'm not the walker, but I decided to do it anyhow. So I'm walking with the sign, and it's nice, and people were generally like okay and thank you and that kind of thing. But the thing I remember about that particular parade is we got to the reviewing stand, and the mayor at the time was the guy Jennings. And there were some policemen standing on the reviewing stand. And I remember as we got there and we faced them, that they didn't look at us. And I said to myself, what's that about? Like, yeah, we're the peace portion of veterans, but we're still the veterans, and we still deserve to be protected by the mayor and the police in the same way that other people. Why are you not looking at us? And that's when I talk about things not changing, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That lack of respect, just human to human. Like, respect us, like you would want me to respect you.